Welcome back to Tech for Thought, where we break down the latest shifts in AI, finance, and emerging tech. Last episode, we sat down with our guest Carvey for a powerful deep dive into the evolving human AI relationship. So it was really interesting, actually. I enjoyed having her on.
Yeah, it was definitely a great
Um,
episode.
yeah, that was a really good one.
Yeah, I mean, Chris thought he was too cool for us, so he didn't
Yeah,
listen to
Yeah,
for real. Where were you, man?
super important other things to handle.
it.
Totally more valuable than this.
But yeah, so today we're shifting focus just on something a little more tactical. We're seeing the rise of low code and no code platforms. And Chris, you mentioned Amazon Bedrocks. They had something going on over there.
Yeah, I mean, Amazon is just making a really heavy push for their kind of low development platform. Basically, they have a stack of multiple models that they leverage. So the best way I could sum this up is it's not exactly a low code, no code platform, but it enables end users to kind of develop their own tools using their Bedrock stack. Bedrock is kind of like I don't know how you would really describe it, kind of like a background platform. I don't know, Sahib,
Hmm.
you have a better way to explain it?
Yeah, I mean, essentially, it's kind of like the back end to kind of run all of their types of AI programs and et cetera, et cetera. If you want to integrate AI into your platforms, I think one cool thing about Amazon Bedrock, which I kind of hope at some point maybe Azure could kind of implement because I love Azure, is that they have all these like top tier foundation models, but the differentiator between Azure, Google, et cetera, is that we can access all of these models through a single API, which is crazy. So instead of locking you into one provider, Bedrock kind of gives you all these options just using a single API. While something like Azure, it has all the models, uh, but essentially you need to kind of pick all the models you want to use, etc., and then get all the different API endpoints, and then get the different keys, etc., etc. So the way Amazon does it, I think I prefer better, but yeah, hopefully Azure kind of picks something up like that. But yeah, it's really cool, the way Amazon does it for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it sounds like. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just saying, I think the big thing in kind of this space right now is really changing people's perception on AI because you see everywhere people are very worried about kind of the ethical side of AI. People don't really understand exactly what AI is. And I think, when we hear about certain companies saying, "Oh, we're moving to be an AI forward business," people kind of freak out about that and they think, oh, that means they're going to fire everybody and replace them with AI. I don't even know.
AI
But AI
bots.
is not going to be replacing a job. Like here, they're just leveraging AI to build a tool, right? And so I think that's a big thing for people to understand. I feel like Bedrock is a really good example of showing how Amazon wants to be AI forward, but they want their end users to be able to develop the tools themselves for their use case. And you see that a lot now with this really heavy push for, low code, no code platforms, or just kind of these platforms where you don't have to have super technical knowledge. Like for instance, you don't have to know what all these different models even are or what they're specialized for. You can basically leverage Bedrock and say, this is the tool that I want to build. This is what I need. And it'll recommend it to you, and you can build off of it without needing to know how basically LLMs work or how machine learning works. You don't need to have a degree in all of that. You can have very little knowledge and still be able to build a tool for yourself. And I think that will kind of have a positive impact on the way AI is seen because, I think a good example would be the Duolingo debacle that's been going on. They announced that they're an AI forward company now, and a lot of people seem to have taken that the wrong way. I mean, they're facing heavy backlash just for saying that, basically. So I think you'll start seeing, because it's more accessible, because more of your everyday person can use it and see what it's actually good for and its limitation. Like, I don't have to worry that my job is going to be taken over by an AI agent. Maybe I'm going to be doing more, like technically more work, you know? I may do more tasks, but it'll be more efficient and accurate. So you always need us, right? So,
Right. I mean, yeah, the cool thing about AI is that it can take care of all the monotonous things. Like, I don't know
mhm.
about you, but I absolutely despise making flows and business diagrams and architecture. I mean, I can basically tell the LLM or whatever platform I'm trying to use what type of architecture I want to use. I want to kind of like showcase and build. Like I'll I'll be building the architecture, but I won't actually have to create the diagram to show like a client or something like that.
Yeah.
And so AI kind of augments our abilities where we're not focusing much on the kind of less important things. AI can kind of take care of that, but then we can spend our time focusing on more of the complex things of like integrating certain technologies into each other, et cetera, et cetera.
So you as the person know this is what I want, but you're just saying, model, I need you to write this document for me or build this Visio for me or something like that. Because like if I already know what I'm building, or maybe a process that's you just need a visual mapping for, I could go in and spend an hour doing a Visio or more doing a Visio, but that's such a waste of my time because I already know it, but now I have to take the time to put these blocks out. I have to draw all the arrows, do the blah 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 blah, all of that stuff. And if I could just put in a prompt, say, hey, this is the process, draw me up a Visio for it, and then if nothing else, it gives you a base thing in like just a couple minutes, and you can go in and make a few edits as needed. You know?
Right, right. I think the thing about Bedrock is that, I mean, at the end of the day, it's also just another platform like Azure. It basically has the same issues plus benefits. Once you have one cloud platform, and the other cloud platform basically does the same thing, just in a different way. I think the benefits are flexibility, customization, and essentially enterprise grade reliability. You can fine tune models with your own data, which is obviously a thing that enterprises would definitely want. It's kind of like that gold standard for enterprises. But just like any other kind of platform, there are challenges, more specifically in governance. You still need proper model oversight, integration into kind of your secure infrastructure, especially if you're in a regulated industry like healthcare. You still need to follow HIPAA laws. You still need to follow these kind of data standards. But yeah, I mean, the cool thing about Bedrock and these other platforms is that it gives you the tools, but you need to also know how to use them responsibly. That's one of the biggest issues when it comes to things like vibe coding. People people sure can code all of these platforms, code all of these apps, but they need to take into consideration security, user authentication, and all of that. Sure, you can have a pretty front end, but if your back end and all the data that's coming to your app is easily accessible by anyone, it's not really responsible, is it?
Yeah.
So while these low code AI development platforms are great, people also need to focus on learning about governance, security, et cetera, et cetera. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
Saheb,
Yeah, and I know.
you said
Go ahead.
earlier that Azure was already doing this, right? Azure had something that's way more developed. So could relying on Amazon's ecosystem instead of Azure's like be like a trade-off for convenience? Like,
I mean, it just really depends, right? So most of these platforms allow easy integration to their own platforms and what they use. Like Azure has its own websites, Azure has its own apps, et cetera, app services, API services. I mean, same thing, same with Amazon. They have a lot of enterprises use Amazon for web hosting, things like that. So I guess it really depends on the type of platform you're using. I mean, both platforms allow for kind of multi-cloud architecture and multi-cloud kind of business planning. So
Uh-huh.
if one cloud gives you something better for one thing and another cloud gives you something better for another thing,
Hmm.
you can kind of use a multitude of different clouds, kind of just like LLMs. One LLM gives you one thing better, another LLM gives you another thing better. But yeah, I think it pretty much depends on what you're using the platform for and what platform you're
Hmm.
using. I mean, the good thing about LLMs and just coding architecture and cloud in general is that there's a lot of ways you can connect these different platforms. I mean, Google just came out with their agent to agent kind of communication, like service, or kind of just like Anthropic's MCP, which allows AI tools to kind of be able to, or AI platforms and LLMs to use these kind of tools as long as they are using this kind of MCP protocol.
Hmm.
So it's cool. Like all of these different platforms and services are coming up with different protocols to allow other LLMs and other services to use their services. So we're kind of getting this mesh of products that we can use that are tailored to whatever use case we want to use it for. We're not kind of stuck in one platform's services and stuff like that. So it's cool.
What is an MC protocol for those that don't know?
So MCP, so it's an MCP, so Model Context
MCP.
Protocol. So it's essentially a protocol that is kind of like the USB-C of like AI tools and AI servers. So essentially, usually when you're trying to connect to a type of service, you need to create a connection and then kind of code all the API endpoints and stuff like that. But the cool thing about MCP is that something like Salesforce or D365 can create their own MCP server, which kind of hosts all of their APIs and things like that. So now, as long as an LLM can understand this MCP protocol, they don't
Hmm.
need to make these custom connections. All they have to do is
Wow.
point to that server, and then they
Uh-huh.
could pull back data at their natural language.
Wow, that's freaking insane. Wow.
Yep. So before you just had like standard LLMs that couldn't really do anything. They could essentially talk to their own data that they're trained on. But now with stuff like MCP, you can connect it to an MCP server, and now you're extending all of these different data sources to your LLM, and your LLM's definitely smarter. It can use all these tools, things like that. So it's cool.
Wow. So that's how they get in there.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yep.
So I've been hearing some SnapLogic's agent creator leverages Amazon Bedrock. So what is SnapLogic? I know that it's in the low code, no code landscape, but I'm not too sure what it is for those of do you guys know what it is?
Yeah, so essentially it's like you said, it's a low code, no code platform. But low code platforms like SnapLogic's Agent Creator are basically compressing the software development lifecycle, right? So instead of weeks or months to dev time where you're having to code every single thing, you can prototype and deploy in days essentially, which is cool. That's very transformational. It essentially reduces reliance on deep coding expertise, and essentially lets business users get involved earlier. So you can kind of allow your business users, if you have like an AP team or a AR team or another like operations team, they can kind of go in and create their own kind of apps and things like that where they're not relying on like a dev team. Now they can go in and prototype and essentially sometimes even lead the process in creating their own apps to kind of help their own business processes.
Oh wow.
But this also means that developers now play more of a architect and governor role, um, and basically ensuring that things are built and still follow best practices. This is
Hmm.
kind of just like vibe coding, but with low code tools. You still need a developer who understands the full application lifecycle, that understands security, governance, and all that. But now you can have your end users kind of create their own app while the developer is kind of creating the more secure backend and architecting and things like that. So it's really cool.
Yeah, I just wonder, what does this mean for the developer? What, like, if this trend continues where we build all of these, it sounds like these low code, no code solutions. What does that mean for the just the developers actually coding the apps, or if they even have to?
Yeah, I mean
Well,
oh, go ahead.
oh, you go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like developers are going to go away. Low code platforms are great, but you're kind of limited by the platform itself, right? You can't make whole custom things. If you need something a bit more complicated, you wouldn't be able to do that in a low code platform. Low code platform allows you to make these kind of simple apps that are integrated into your systems where you can kind of automate processes if you want. But if you want like a full custom app, you're still going to need developers to kind of add pro code capabilities, pro code logic, and things like that.
Yeah, working with clients that, leverage these low code platforms, low code, no code platforms, we run into that pretty often where you have to have someone with a higher level of expertise, technical expertise to come in and fill those gaps. There's a lot of JavaScripting, there's a lot of various languages that are used. Are you integrating with a SQL server? Like there's a lot of stuff
Yeah.
with data storage and kind of the back end stuff that still has to have technical, not you have to have technical knowledge for. Then some of these companies, especially these bigger companies, they don't want a low code, no code platform. They want something much more advanced, much more complex. You know, Low code, no code platforms are great for, like Saib said, just your your managers that want to build something for their team to improve efficiency, or maybe a part, like you said, operations. Maybe your operations branch, they felt they could develop some apps. I know recently we were talking about there was a construction company and they let their like the site foreman go and actually like talk to the people that were there and like the people that he worked with and stuff like that. And he actually started playing around with building applications and stuff. And that's just for his own specific team on that site, of him just trying to figure out some things that make his life easier and their lives easier. So he basically spoke with their IT team. They taught him a little bit and kind of guided him on how to get started with the low code, no code platform. He had no knowledge of coding or anything. He was able to develop something that he really liked with the low code, and basically did his own research to fill any small gaps. I don't think he used any code, like no JavaScript plugins, anything like that. But
Wow.
he did have to run it by an IT team because they've got to ensure best practices. They've got to ensure, everything's built out properly, testing is properly done, like these are not a one size fits all. And so developers will always be needed for some gap in the system there. And I always think when it comes to your back end development and these companies as they grow, they're going to run into instances where like, okay, well, this low code, no code setup that we've had for X amount of years, it's not working to the capacity we need it to now. So we've got some developers that we've had along this whole time. They have the technical knowledge. They also are very familiar with the platform. Now we can kind of unleash their capabilities a little bit more, let them develop something a little bit more complex. And so you can build off of that low code, pro code. So it's just a really great starting point for users because it's simple. You can build it yourself. Anybody could realistically go look at some Microsoft documentation, learn a little bit, and then it's super intuitive after that. Because we can sit here and we can talk about, oh, relational databases, one-to-many
Uh,
relationships, and all these other things. But at the end of the day, you don't really need to know all of this technical knowledge, to
mhm.
get some of the basics done.
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, I think that's where your developers will come in. They'll still be handy. You'll still be like secure long term, like there's still going to always need to be deeper developers.
Yeah, I think one big issue with these kind of low code platforms is I remember I was working on a client and they wanted to do some type of fuzzy searching logic on because they were doing something like invoicing, right? And so they were trying to automate their invoice process. So one big issue was that a lot of the invoices that were coming in did not have the same exact name to match the system that they were trying to use. It could be any type of whatever ERP platform they're trying to use. So what we did was we were trying to do kind of like the fuzzy searching in this low code platform. And in this instance, it was Power Automate, and it was difficult because the amount of vendors and things that they had was way too much for this low code platform to handle. So what we ended up doing was we ended up utilizing a Azure function that was coded in Python. So we built a Python function that did all this fuzzy searching for this kind of low code platform where it was 1,000 times easier to kind of do these fuzzy searching um, logics that we had to implement that we couldn't do in this low code platform. And I know people think like, oh, pro code is it's super hard, but in this instance, the low code platform was harder than the pro code solution, at least for
I
me.
know. Yeah, I know. One time we were on a project and we were building out just these massive automation flows for Power Automate. And it got to the point where, like you said, it's got that limitation and it was just eating up so much of the capacity that they were like, let's see if we can transition this into, a web resource or a plugin type thing. And so we ended up just taking JavaScript and building it in JavaScript and using it as a plugin instead of the Power Automate because yeah, it's great for a lot of things, but once you get so deep into it, it's like okay, we want this running every single time a record is created. They can be creating 100 records on an import, and now all of a sudden we've got this one Power Automate flow that could take up to 5 minutes to run, but it's
Yeah.
going to do that 100 times. So you've got to be like, okay, that's just too much. We're going to run
Too
the
many
the
minutes.
plugin instead, and that's what it is, though. These low code, no code, it is literally just meant to fill in. I mean, to a really great extent. I'm not downplaying that is actually really amazing what you can do with it. But there are still limitations and trade-offs. So there's a point where you have to say, okay, let's flip this over to here. Maybe you go a little bit more. But that's a good example of low code. You just
Yeah.
do a little bit of JavaScript. You're not writing SQL
Full
for a
apps.
database or anything like that. You're just here's a little bit of JavaScript. I mean, you could throw in what you want it to do in Chat GPT and it'll spit you out a JavaScript thing for you to give it a shot.
Yeah, the thing I like about low code platforms is that you can build front ends. So it kind of helps developers in general, right? So developers, if they're more of kind of, if they spent their life mostly on back end solutions rather than having to code like HTML, JavaScript, all that jazz, um, now you're basically augmenting developers to kind of have their own front end. Now they can kind of build their front end with low code solutions, but now they can hook up their backends to these low code solutions where now they don't have to, these developers don't need a front end developer or they don't even need to learn front end development, where now they can just put up a kind of low code front end and then
Shell.
have all their backend stuff, which is
That's pretty
cool.
cool. That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
Front end's
No,
probably the easiest to automate, though. Back end's where all the all the real stuff happens.
Whoa, let's not downplay the
No, I'm
need for
just
front
kidding.
end
I'm just
developers
kidding.
here.
You're right. You're right. You're right. I'm just
Front
kidding.
end front end it's just nicer to have it already set up so simply, I know
Yeah.
in Dynamics, I mean, even if I want to create a new button, it's just super easy to make, especially as and I just think we keep seeing more and more of these platforms where I think just the amount of the growth and efficiency is absolutely astronomical in the last probably 5 years. And I mean, we're talking about kind of low code, no code for these platforms, but I mean, kind of wrapping it back to Bedrock, that, you know, this is kind of their equivalent with different AI models. They're saying, here, build a model that works for you, but you don't have to use your data to train the model. So you don't have to worry about your own data being used in it. You can leverage this that's already been trained based on other similar jobs, whatever they have training it. But you yourself do not have to use your specific work, client, whatever it is, information to train the model. It's pre-trained. You get, let's see, they have automatic evaluation, human evaluation, and model as judge setups. So you can basically manually select which models you use out of their stack. So they have Anthropic, Llama, I think. So Claude, Llama, Stability AI, which I'm actually not familiar with.
Yeah,
And
that one
then
I don't
Amazon
know.
has its own Titan models. But you can pick and choose from it. And so they actually have, what is it called? They've got something called just like model evaluate. I'm not super familiar with it I've never actually gotten hands-on in it, but I
Yeah,
know that
so
they have the three different ways. So they're like, they have this model as judge thing, which is really interesting to me. And it's
Mhm.
where they use a model to evaluate the output of another model, and then it kind of provides insights on that output. So it's basically a different model checking another model so you can try to figure out which direction you want to go.
yeah,
So,
so something like that is really cool, because Azure also has something like that. So kind of like with clients, if we're trying to kind of mitigate the cost to a client, we'll try to do something like where we'll take a smaller model, right? And then we'll fine tune it on certain data that the client wants to use. And then we'll try to take that data and kind of match it to the output of a large language model, where now the low parameter model that costs a lot less is now outputting the same type of answers as would a larger model that costs more. So then we can use a larger model to kind of judge the smaller model's outputs, where the client is spending less for basically the same answers,
yeah.
if not better.
Yeah, I like it. I think Bedrock is going to be something interesting to watch, and it sounds like its direct competitor is Azure's AI Foundry from what you're saying. So,
Yeah, I mean it'd be
I think
cool because with all of this competition, it's just gonna make Azure AI Foundry get better, because if Amazon comes out with something, Azure is gonna want to kind of one up them as well, Microsoft. And then if Microsoft comes out with something, Amazon Bedrocks is gonna try to come up with something. So it just kind of keeps things interesting.
and kind of on our topic of, where the developers are going and stuff like that. I think something we forget about is all these models, they don't just pop up out of nowhere. Like, people are on the back end developing these models constantly.
Yep.
Um, and I think people forget that. And, I think, when I was growing up, everybody was always saying, focus, learn coding, learn coding. It's the future, like, learn how to do software stuff. Like, people in the 90s, they didn't understand, blah, blah, blah. Like, that's what people told me growing up all the time. And I think nowadays we should look to, people coming through high school and college and say, hey, you know, I think I've seen people in middle school and intermediate schools learning, basic coding like JavaScript and stuff like that, or whatever languages they teach. I don't know. But I have seen, younger people. I mean, it's basically a staple like typing was for us, right? I think my advice to people would be learn about large language models, learn machine learning. Like these are the things that are going to give you job security in the future. Learn learn cybersecurity, like all of those things, like those three things right there. If you want job security in the future and to see an industry that's going to be growing constantly, like that would be the way to go. If you're into the development world, you're interested into that, maybe nowadays just knowing JavaScript and these kind of more common languages isn't going to be everything for you like it maybe has in the past. In the past maybe 15 years up until this point, you could know some basic languages and you've separated yourself from a crowd. But now I think it's so common for people to know coding, at least on a low level,
Yep.
that find something more future proof, So
Yeah, I think the I know we had a question where it was like how can enterprises essentially balance the ease of low code platforms and with the need for customization and control. And I think that the balance comes from kind of this layered architecture with permission workflows. And a business can let their users experiment with these low code platforms with prompts and UI workflows, but then lock down the back end integrations and data pipelines.
mhm.
So this is a kind of interesting uh, analogy where you can think of it of like a sandbox inside a walled garden. You can play, but the fences are there for a reason. So so you have these like developers who are locking down the back end where they can get these kind of what essentially what their users want. So and then kind of create the back end where the front end users like your business users can create the UIs and everything and kind of create the steps that they need the app to do so they can create the front end and kind of get in on the development process, but it's really the developers who are kind of dealing with the security and data integration and stuff like that to help with governance.
Yeah. Yeah, I think those are kinds of the things where if you are a future developer of any sort, these are things to hear, don't be deterred hearing everybody talk about how AI is going to be stealing people's jobs. It's going to provide a lot more jobs as well. Maybe there's going to be a little bit of a shift in some aspects, but most of it's going to open up jobs. You're going to see with more efficiency means, have you ever thought of a time where a company's like, oh, wow, yeah, everybody can be more efficient. That means I'm going to make them work less hours. No, just means you're going to get more tasks. And
Oh,
with more work,
yeah.
with more tasks, there's more people, the projects get larger. Now that my employees can do this at these like remedial tasks in a tenth of the time. Well, now I feel like as a company, we can do more. We can be more creative. I want more heads in here, like I think you're going to have that plus all these the low code, no code platforms are blowing up right now from AI
Hmm.
development. Citizen developers is what we call it, right? A citizen developer is basically the type of person that's not going to have like the deep technical knowledge in the back end, but
Hmm.
you understand how it's going to work and you can build your own application and so on. But with the explosion of that means, like you said, people are going to be on the back end having to manage that security roles. Like you said, like the guardrails, storage, like these are all things you still have to have somebody to manage the teams that are able to access certain things, in like environment management, solution management. Like these are all things that will need to be done by someone at a more technical position. And so most of these companies, you have to realize, like a lot of these companies, they didn't really have a large crew of people hired anyways that were doing these. Like, if I'm a company and I need a website built, I don't just have a whole team of people on salary that I pay to build a website and manage a website. I'll
Mm,
either hire a consulting firm or a firm of some sort to build me a website, or now there's all these, preset website kind of platforms or whatever it may be. So now they're saying, okay, well, I'm going to have this low code no code platform. I'll hire someone in the back end to manage it rather than it being a one off. This is what I want built. Okay, we have our IT manager. He'll, manage the roles and stuff. But now you'll have, because of this, you'll have more positions, more opportunities. And I
mm,
think because it's so much cheaper for a company to have this in place than pay a company to come in and do some really advanced high end system, you know. So basically a company that wouldn't have had this platform and wouldn't have needed a position there for people to kind of manage that back end because of the platform itself being so much cheaper but having so much of an upside, they're going to want to invest in that. They're going to want to invest in a couple people to like come in and manage that back end. And so I do think what I'm trying to say is with the growth and expansion of the platforms comes more openings for people to come in and be able to manage that in the back end. So
yeah, I was curious to see like what advancements can we anticipate in the next like 5, 10 years within, what do you think like within the no code, low code landscape?
it's a good question.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely making AI accessible to everyone, from product managers to HR professionals. I mean, that essentially opens the floodgates for innovation, right? So instead of bottlenecking everything through a dev team, now ideas can come from anywhere. It's basically like we're moving from an AI specialist model to an AI everywhere model. So I mean, these advancements will basically allow anybody the kind of flexibility to, like I said, innovate. So
Yeah. Do you
it's
think
great.
that'll show in like maybe a new role being developed or like maybe how it influences the future of work and the skills required in tech? Like will there maybe be a new degree that focuses on something like that? And that's like way down the line. But
I
that's
don't, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's going to be a new degree.
or like not a degree, but like a position in a
Yeah,
company.
yeah, I don't think it's going to be a new position. I think it's going to be more of you're going to need these skills to kind of operate in the fields that you're already operating in.
Mm,
So it's kind of like the finance industry where if you think of recent hirings and things like that and the way the finance industry has kind of shifted, um, you need people that have these kind of tech skills to be able to augment their whatever type of investments and things that they're making. Where these kind of it's kind of weird to say, but these kind of fossils that are stuck in the old ways are kind of being pushed out for more innovative people. So I think that's kind of be the shift across all industries where they're going to want people that have these kind of skills to kind of augment the things that people in these positions are already doing.
Yeah, I think maybe not new degrees or new positions, but I do think you'll see a lot of specific degrees
that have
become
some
more
sort of
common.
focus or maybe something.
Well, because like for me, right, I had management information systems. So that
Oh,
gave
that's a
me,
yeah.
it's nothing super technical. I did a little
Uh,
bit of coding. I did some data structuring and, a little bit here and there in it, but most of
mhm,
it is still, it's still business and management, but
mhm,
you do learn some of that technical stuff. And I think that is really what transitioned so well for me into the low code, no code stuff. And then I was able to learn from there more coding, more technical stuff. How is this interacting? How is that interacting?
mhm,
But I understood relational databases and how SQL works and how SQL integrates differently and all of these different
mhm,
warehousing structures and stuff like that. So it was a little bit, I think a degree like that is going to be more commonplace now as we see the kind of expansion of all of this. So, and I would tell people go for, management information systems because I was just getting a typical, biz and business administration degree, but I pivoted into management information systems because I've always been interested in like coding and stuff like that. And I tried, HTML, CSS, but I wasn't really big into the, building websites thing. So I ended up going and doing a little bit of JavaScript and a little bit of Python and then a little bit of SQL and then realizing I hated SQL and going back to Python. So I think you'll see like, more of these degrees, you don't see a lot of people with a management information systems degree. It's
Mhm.
normally something more vague or something much more specific. So,
Yeah, I was
but
gonna
it's for
say
the
that's a
majority.
newer degree, right? Management
Yeah.
information systems. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a
man,
good one.
I think at the end of the day, while these kind of low code, pro code tools can kind of empower these non-tech users, I think the organizations need to set up the proper roles and use these kind of like approval flows and kind of create curated libraries of connectors and templates.
Yeah.
Also, don't let everyone have access to everything. Make it easy to build, but also hard to break. I think a kind of center of excellence is necessary when it comes to governance. I think all companies will need this kind of center of excellence as a model where you centralize all the expertise, security, and review processes, but then also add federated champions in each business unit who can essentially provide support locally while still aligning with the IT practices and stuff like that, and IT itself.
Hmm.
So you kind of need these kind of champions that work within each business unit, review everybody's kind of tools, et cetera, kind of be in line with IT. Now, IT can't be everywhere, right? But IT can kind of train these champions within each business unit where if they see something going wrong, they can be like, "Hey, IT, we need you to step in and kind of review these apps and kind of help with the security and stuff." So,
So
Yeah.
what's a champion? I'm not familiar. So like, is that somebody who you appoint as the subject matter expert,
yeah,
or?
essentially. I mean, it's not like it's not like a defined role. It's just like
Hmm.
something I was suggesting where you while companies can kind of empower all of their business units, like their AP team, AR team, to
Hmm.
kind of have these low code tools to kind of create their own processes, you still
Mm.
need someone there
Okay.
to kind of be the oversight, right?
Uh-huh.
That understands the kind of policies that IT has, where if
Uh-huh.
they see something going wrong,
I
they can
see.
provide support locally, but then also get IT involved when necessary.
Okay, so it sounds like cross collaboration, and then account. You said AR, AP, AR. That's accounts payable, receivable,
Yep,
invoicing
yep,
stuff.
yep. All
Okay.
companies have that, so yeah,
Yeah, yeah, and that's something you'd want to automate if you were looking to involve low code, no code landscape, from what I've heard so far. But
yep,
yeah, interesting.
I would say you can really think of a lot. Like if you sat down and you thought about your job, I guarantee you anybody could think about a part of their job that they could automate and it wouldn't interfere with them at all. Like we could all find something in our job to automate, whether it's something you just don't like
Hmm.
doing because it takes you a long time, like me. I don't like drawing out elaborate videos and not 20 of them either. And so I would
Visio.
love to just have that, you know, go ahead, take it like as far as just prompting it and at least it drawing out the main basis for it all. And then I could go in and, make updates. But I would love to not have to do that or documentation on builds and stuff. Like, okay, I would love to just say, this is what I've done. This is the format.
yep,
Do that.
yep,
So
right.
I actually never knew what Visio was. I was curious about it real quick.
Hmm.
Is it like a architecture where you draft out the architecture of relational databases, or is that
Kind
something?
of. I mean, you
You
can use it
can.
for that. It's basically just a diagramming platform. So you can
Yeah.
Hmm.
create system architecture if you're trying to
Oh,
connect
okay.
different
Gotcha.
systems, or
For like
create
best
like business
practices.
processes, kind
Okay.
of, or
Yeah.
like create business process flows where, let's say
Yep.
you're trying to create a automation for something, but you want to map out what somebody's day to day is in reality, and then now you can match that automation to that business process flow. So
Yep. Yeah, we
Interesting.
use it a lot for mapping out business processes. We've done current state processes to future state processes. So you draw out all of their current processes, just business processes, and then you
Interesting.
basically analyze that and figure out ways that the system can do it better, what can be kind of consolidated, so then you have to draw out mapping for that as well for the new process flows, and you're just like presenting that to the client. You're saying, hey, how do you feel about this? And then they'll come back and you're just kind of adjusting Visios all the time. So I
yep.
mean
So
that one you have to be a little more hands-on maybe, but that's kind of what we use Visio for. It's just it can be used for architectural mapping, it can be used for business process mapping. It's just, yeah, it's just diagramming platform.
yeah, so
Interesting.
I'll leave the users with this. So going back to like the future of work, I think communication, problem solving, and domain expertise will matter more than coding syntax. So
Mm,
the new rock stars in tech won't just be devs; they'll be AI savvy problem solvers who can speak both tech and business.
yep.
Um, but yeah, so I think you'll need to be more of a well-rounded person rather than just focusing on tech. You'll also have to take into consideration the business aspect of work.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it's important to kind of touch on these job things. I think I see a lot of times where people really freak out when they hear about their company or another company they like starting to go in on AI, and they just don't understand. We've all watched too many sci-fi movies, I think. And so people don't
Terminator.
really do research. They're like, "Oh, I've seen the movie." It's like, no, this is not how it works. I promise. They're not gonna come and, destroy the world. They can barely get a PowerPoint together. So they're not gonna be able to figure out how to completely take your job or your family or your dog or your cat or your children. So don't worry. But like I just, I have family members that were really worried about it. And, I saw this whole thing with Duolingo, and I was just, it's kind of one of those things where I read the LinkedIn post. I'm like, I don't understand why people are so upset about it. But it's just because people see that a company's AI forward, and then maybe there were layoffs recently, and they're like, oh, well, the layoffs were because they're moving to AI, when in reality, it's not. It's like look at Apple or Microsoft. I mean, they've been dropping people like flies in the last 4 or 5 years. I mean, tens of thousands of let
Employees.
go kind of people, whatever you want to call
Former.
it, right?
Let go kind of
Um,
people.
Let go,
I
people.
I couldn't think of the phrase. Um,
They were let it
I
go.
just well, because like any company doing layoffs, is like,
Yeah.
okay,
No.
well, we
Mhm.
happen to be going into an age of AI, if you will, but that's not the reason people are losing their jobs. Not saying that AI stuff can't have a small hand in it, but that's not the reason people are losing their jobs. And I think that's a very important thing to know, and to not get freaked out by AI, and instead to learn it and leverage your knowledge of it. Because I think we talked about this either last week or the week before. Like it's here, whether you like it or you don't like it, you know, it's here. It's like the internet. People very much against the internet. They were against all of that stuff back in the 90s. Guess what? Every company uses the internet in some way. We've got intranets, as well as, what I mean, shoot, we use Google all the time, or search engine all the time for work stuff. emails are based on internet, like everything we do, Zoom calls are based on, like this is all it's all the future, right? So I just think that it's important to go into it with a level head. I think, and kind of wrapping up here, I think it's good to have the ethical questions. It's good that people are have that empathy and they want to say like, we want to protect our people, our fellow people to so they're not losing jobs over technology and stuff like that. And I love that. I love the passion. I just think it's important to go in with a level head and the proper education on it. So definitely keep companies keep everything in question. Make sure that like that everybody's abiding by ethics and morals and stuff like that. But
Mhm.
also understand that it's it's still here. You're gonna need to know it. Just
Yeah.
do the right thing. So
Yep. With that being said, thanks for tuning in to Tech for Thought. If you enjoyed today's episode, please follow, rate, or like whatever it is. Share the podcast with anyone curious about maybe tech, finance, whatever. And then check out our link tree for all the latest updates and socials. We'll probably post some like clips, short clips of everything. And yeah, we'll go from there.
Yeah. Thank you guys for listening. See you guys next week. Bye.
Peace.